It is my pleasure now to introduce Raji Laxman. Born and raised in South India in a traditional and religious family, Raji moved to the United States in the mid-90s after her marriage. She has been a member of the Ethical Society for the past 2 years and has worked at WashU for the past 16 years. And she will speak on casteism, what is it, and why does it matter? Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of this esteemed audience. I've been, like Lance mentioned, I've been a member for the past few years, ever since I first came in to listen to James Craft's Star Trek, one of his Star Trek talks. My presentation today, though, is about casteism and why it matters for us as a society. This is a heavy, multi-layered, multifaceted topic which touches many disciplines: history, religion, philosophy, anthropology, sociology, and many more. And I'd like to start off with the disclosure that I'm not an expert in any of those fields, but what I would like to present you with is a peek behind the curtains about casteism in India and how it relates to some of the similar social structures here in the West. In order to do justice to the topic of caste in a fair and objective way, I did some reading and research from the lens of an outsider, and my presentation today is based on those findings and my personal experiences growing up in India. If there are factual errors or omissions or misrepresentations, I apologize in advance. At a conceptual level, caste is a form of social stratification and a belief system that's used to create and sustain systemic oppression of one group of people to wield power and influence over another. It usually, the term itself, it commonly refers to the social structures that's most prevalent in India and has been in place for the past few millennia. The popular theory around caste is that it originated from Hindu holy texts and categorized people by birth into different castes and is sanctioned and prescribed in the religion to restrict what they can and cannot do in their lifetime. The word caste itself does not have an Indian origin. It's derived from the Portuguese word casta, which roughly translates to lineage. To get to know the roots of casteism in India, it would help to take a walk back in time in Indian history and Hinduism. As far back as 2500 BC in the documented world history, alongside the Egyptian and Mesopotamian civilizations, there was a rich culture in northern India, Indus Valley civilization, that existed for several centuries in the modern day areas of India and Pakistan. And it seems to have ended around 1500 BC, and there are many theories around how they may have become non-existent. And the next significant period in Indian history is the Vedic period from 1500 BC to around 1500 AD. And this is the period where most of the Hindu holy texts were written in Sanskrit, and they were verbally transmitted across many centuries and generations before they were finally written down. The Vedas form the basis for a lot of other texts and is a collection of hymns, rituals, philosophies, guidelines, and practices detailing the moral and eternal duties of individuals, among other aspects of living as a community and a society. Due to the depth and variety of all of these texts, one could imagine the variety in the interpretations as well. Much of the cultural traditions and the basis for modern-day Hinduism come from this period. And there is reference in one of the Vedas to what is called the Varnas, that classifies people by their inherent nature or quality, and the highest being priests and scholars called Brahmins, warriors and kings grouped as Kshatriyas, merchants and traders called Vaishyas, and the manual laborers as Shudras. There's also reference in the ancient texts to jatis, which is more around by birth, the tribe or clan you're born into. Buddhism originated in India and spread to neighboring countries starting around 500 BC. And then there were multiple Hindu empires across India for several centuries with rich documented history. And this was the period when kingdoms from southern India expanded to Southeast Asian countries, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Thailand, where there is still a strong presence and roots of Hinduism. Muslim invasion from the West saw another period of changes for a few centuries in northern India, and this is the time when Taj Mahal and a lot of other architectural marvels were built around this time. And during the 17th and 18th centuries, the British started taking a foothold in the Indian subcontinent when sea trade routes were established via the British East India Company. And they used the popular social groups and divisions that existed at the time and interpreted and interpolated some of the Hindu scripts to their advantage to create a single Hindu identity that would make it easier for them to divide and conquer. And that's when the Portuguese word casta was adopted to codify the Hindu laws as the caste system we know today to establish, ingrain, and entrench the idea of religious and moral purity and pollution that was inherited by birth. It is said that before the British arrived, there was the concept of caste in the form of varnas and jatis, but the system around it and its rigid rules were institutionalized and weaved into the Indian culture during this time, thereby creating the ism around the casteism. According to this, individuals are assigned a certain caste based on their birth that predetermines their occupation, their social status, and social mobility or lack thereof. Using the religious concepts of karma and reincarnation, it was imposed on them that they were destined to be born that way. They cannot do anything about their state or status since it was ordained by a higher power, and they will have to live out their lifetime because it was their duty to do so. And if they followed those rigid rules within that hierarchy, they may be born into a higher caste in their next lifetime. And it has only been in the past 100 years or so that there has been significant effort and progress in moving away from that concept. There is no mention of caste in pre-colonial travelogues and texts, even though there are references to the social divisions that existed at that time. So the colonial period in India ended in 1947 after a long freedom struggle of nonviolence led by Mahatma Gandhi, who was an inspiration to other world leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela. Pakistan became an independent Muslim nation at the same time, and in its current form of democratic government, India recently celebrated the 75th Independence Day a few weeks ago. We see evidence of some form of social stratification and oppression throughout history in different civilizations, either in the form of slavery, indentured servitude, or other means. But the reason for the caste system to have sustained for so long is its formalization in the colonial period, creating a caste that was totally outside the system, calling them untouchables, and they were denied basic human rights and resources. The concepts of social groups had morphed from being malleable and flexible to becoming rigid and fixed, having gone through so many evolutions over the past many centuries by those at the top who had vested interests in retaining their wealth, ruling status, and power, building rivalry, mistrust, and lack of empathy toward fellow human beings, leading to all kinds of other problems that affect the society as a whole. With this long history and centuries of different cultural influences, India is now a pluralistic, multilingual, and multi-ethnic society, but the results of the prolonged exploitation, abuse, and discrimination from the caste system still remain and is an extremely hard challenge to address holistically. As you can see, the diversity of languages and groups is pretty amazing. Dr. Ambedkar was one of the key political leaders and a social reformer who chaired the committee that drafted the Indian Constitution right after the independence. Holding doctorate degrees from Columbia University in the US and London School of Economics, he himself was a member of the lower castes, and he was instrumental in introducing a system similar to the affirmative action, reserving jobs in civil services, allocating seats for admission in schools and colleges to lift up those that had been historically disadvantaged. Untouchability was officially abolished, and laws are currently in place to prohibit caste discrimination. And there has been, with the increased access to education, there has been some progress. And even though there have been high-ranking officials and leaders from lower castes, there's a lot more work to be done to truly level the playing field for everyone. There are currently a few thousand castes and several thousand subcastes and divisions that no one truly has an accurate record of. Against popular beliefs that the caste system is called out in the Vedas and is limited to Hinduism and India, caste actually penetrates religions and countries. There had been mass conversions from Hinduism to Buddhism and other religions, but in India and some of the Southeast Asian countries, the concept of caste is so entrenched in the cultural fabric that it touches every religion and every aspect of life there. It was not created by the colonizers either, but they just interpreted ancient texts and created a retrofitting and divisive theory that worked in their benefit. Casteism continues to be a social evil hidden in plain sight, dehumanizing people based on arbitrary concepts, and is a disturbing reality and a system of power that needs to be dismantled. Education is a great equalizer. With the increase in access to education, there had been some progress in generational wealth and status for some families from the lower castes, allowing opportunities and jobs in other countries, including the United States. But caste follows as a shadow in unseen ways and forms. These headlines you see over here are from the past year or two, with the most recent article from, on Google from June of this year. Caste discriminations have continued in the technology sector and higher ed, where it gets harder to even enforce any rules or policies if it hasn't even been a concept or part of the vernacular. Equality Labs is a US-based civil rights activism group that did an extensive survey in 2018, which inspired the study and essay you saw in the previous slide, published by Harvard Law Review. And if any of you are interested, that's a good article to start off of. It has a lot of links to other articles that kind of give a holistic view of what's happening right now. Dr. Suraj Engde is a Harvard scholar, and his book, Caste Matters, was published in 2019, with his lived experience and personal stories as he elevated himself through the gift of education to rise up to a Harvard scholar. He calls the system an open prison and details his continued activism to dismantle the system. And there have been countless other groups working tirelessly toward uplifting the socially disadvantaged. And I wanted to highlight one group in specific, Shanti Bhavan. They have been they adopt one kid per family from lower castes and sponsor them throughout their K through 12 education all the way into higher ed, with some of their latest graduates entering Dartmouth, University of Chicago, Middlebury College, and University of Rochester. And in the recent past, the term caste is being referenced in a broader context. Author Dr. Isabel Wilkerson talks about 3 different systems of oppression and draws out similarities among them in her 2020 book, Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents. She defines caste as the granting or withholding of respect, status, honor, attention, privileges, resources, benefit of the doubt, and human kindness to someone on the basis of their perceived rank or standing in the hierarchy. She talks about caste drawing parallels from the atrocities in Nazi Germany, the racial inequalities in the United States, and the caste system in India. She talks about the Nazi Germany as a successful dismantling of the system and highlights the need to understand the origins and historical contexts of these systems to address the inequalities head-on. Not everyone agrees with her comparisons. Some take issue with the fact that she did not address the universally persistent hierarchy and oppression that has existed since the dawn of time, man versus woman. In India, not everyone agrees with the notion that the ancient Hindu texts may have been misinterpreted and morphed by those in power and higher ranks for their own advantage. No matter where we stand in ideologies or factual accuracies or literary criticism, we cannot ignore the shocking similarities and disturbing outcomes from such systems and what they do to a community as a whole. Even though we may not have contributed to these sins of the past, these are ours to deal with now. In Dr. Wilkerson's analogy, we are like homeowners who inherited a beautiful house with a flawed foundation. Unless we gather the courage to address the uncomfortable truths and fix our foundation, we all stand to lose. By not doing anything, we are contributing to the perpetuation of these social evils. In spite of the wealth accumulation, progress in technology and innovation, if we look at some of the key indicators for quality of life in countries where such discriminations run rampant, they are not trending positive. All the isms and phobias crush human creativity and ingenuity, making us worse as a collective species. It stunts our progress and increases hatred, violence, and is a tremendous waste of human talent and potential. It's an immense challenge and not just something that can be enforced by laws or by a single event. It requires change of hearts and minds, and every one of us joining hands in lifting ourselves up as global citizens. I'd like to close with the content from Dr. Wilkerson's epilogue in her book, Caste. In a world without caste, instead of a false swagger over our own tribe or family or ascribed community, we would look upon all of humanity with wonderment. We would enjoy all of humanity's feats, filling us with awe and astonishment at what the species is capable of and the gratitude to be alive for this. In a world without caste, being male or female, light or dark, immigrant or native born, would have no bearing on what anyone was perceived as being capable of. We would all be invested in the well-being of others, of our species, if only for our own survival, and recognize we are in need of one another more than we have been led to believe. A world without caste would set everyone free. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Raji. The ushers will now take up a collection to support the Society. If you are moved to make a donation today, we appreciate anything you may be able to offer. We rely on the generosity of our members and friends to ensure that our community can keep providing our many free programs. If you don't have cash with you today, you can donate at ethicalstl.org/donate or use the QR code. Yes, QR code on the screen now. Or even better, become a pledging member. We would like to keep you informed about future events at the Ethical Society of St. Louis. If you'd like to join our weekly newsletter, use the QR code above to sign up. And I have a few announcements. First announcement is that the Ethical Society is hosting a booth at the Tower Grove Pride Festival, September 24th and 25th. Sign-up sheets are on the welcome table and back. Please consider volunteering your time to promote our community. If you have any questions, reach out to Laura Nottingham or Cy Henningsen. Next, local honey is being sold in the Becker Room today. All proceeds will go to the International Institute to benefit immigrants from Ukraine and other countries. And James has some announcements.
Thank you.
Oh, there you are.
I just didn't want to do the whole walking down the aisle thing. Good morning, everyone.